So Adam Silver had did a presser when he spoke about this new resting policy. And it's so funny, before we even get to that presser, just keep in mind that Adam Silver just last year during the All-Star break, he said that the medical data supported guys resting. And that was just last year during the All-Star break. Now, currently, we're seeing it unravel where the NBA TV partners, particularly ESPN, was going through a battle with Charter, in which they were trying to kind of renegotiate their deal, and Charter kind of took the position of dominance in those negotiations. They was willing to let them go. There was even reverting to telling customers to go sign up for another plan that offers them sports. Charter kind of took the initiative of saying, hey, ESPN, look, the jig is up. This surcharge of you just forcing our customers to get more expensive packages just because, you know, you guys had sports or you guys had expensive TV licensing deals, and you forced our hands to force our customers who don't even mess with ESPN to take it. That little fun ride is over. And the cable companies have been taking a huge hit, and a lot of them have realized they actually make more money when they offer the internet only customers certain packages for like either apps or TV channels. So they make more money off of those deals, which kind of took away ESPN's leverage of kind of strong arming the cable companies. And with these broadcasting companies like ESPN, there's a lot of upfront costs in obtaining these licenses for NFL, NBA, etc. And best believe the NBA has been eating really well off of ESPN being able to strong arm the cable companies and the cable consumers into taking their packages whether they watch sports or not. But a lot of this resting policy with Adam Silver has to do with pleasing their TV partners. And we kind of seen it play out during the bubble, in which ESPN was in a really bad situation, making no money from their parks. And now they kind of just had the NBA scramble and give them some sort of content, because they kept saying it was about safety, but there was no real science on what was going on with the Rona situation. But before I get to the presser, I want you to hear directly from Stephen A. Smith how bad it really was during the pandemic for ESPN. He kind of gives you an idea on it. You're going to hear directly from Mr. ESPN himself.
A few weeks later, it was announced that 7,000 layoffs was coming.
Yes.
You can't work. You got to be a new fool, a new kind of fool, to not know that ESPN is going to suffer some cuts.
Sure.
When its parent company announces that 7,000 cuts are coming to make up for $5.5 billion. COVID hits, parks close, movie theaters close, ESPN, no live sporting events. We took a tremendous loss. I gave back 15% of my salary. 50% of my salary. Okay? Because they come to you asking you, is that something you can do? You're not forced. It's voluntary.
Wait, yeah. What?
That's right. It's not forced. It's voluntarily. They came to me. I was the first one to say, yeah, here you go.
Well, what's the alternative?
Wait, who's coming to me to say that?
Right now, if
the boss?
If you lost
one of the bosses,
you lost a Patreon deal and you came to us and said, yo, shit is tight right now. Would y'all take or consider a pay cut?
Got it.
Right. And I do it again. And I do it again because here's the reason why.
I got it.
Here's the reason why. If you don't do it, then those cats, you making millions, but those cats that's making 150, 200,000, a whole bunch of them gonna lose their jobs. Now, some of them gonna lose their jobs anyway, but even more of them are gonna lose their jobs. You can't be somebody that's not just a talent, but they've asked you to lead, you volunteered to lead, you are considered a leader, but then all of a sudden it's just about you. Sure, I want my money. I earned it. I didn't want to give back a damn thing, but looking at the landscape, I knew inevitably what they were going to ask me to do, and I didn't hesitate. There was no, I think about it, I get back to you, whatever. They said, Stephen A., this is something that, we're going to have to ask of our employees at some point. I said, take mine now. Here you go. That's all right. I'll be okay.
So Stephen A. Smith definitely took a pay cut to help his employees, but best believe on a higher level, the NBA has worked with ESPN to help them out, which is a major TV partners of theirs, during the pandemic, to give them some sort of content, because they were struggling to come up with content. But right now, Adam Silver is definitely pivoting things in a direction, especially amidst a new TV deal, in which he's trying to make the NBA package seem more appealing and kind of making it more on demand, as we can see it playing out with the NBA adding the mid-season tournament and also the play-in. They need to spice things up in order to help their TV partners. So the same way Stephen A. Smith took a pay cut is the same way the league is sort of helping out ESPN and other TV partners like TNT and Turner Sports. So you guys check out this presser by Adam Silver, and every once in a while, I'll check in.
And a bit of discussion about some of the rule changes for this season with a real focus on player participation. And I know you've all now seen the release from the vote we took earlier today regarding some changed approach to reinforcing the notion that we're an 82-game league. And that's something that Joe Dumars, our Executive Vice President of Basketball Operations, has been really reinforcing, and I think someone who has the credibility to help the league, frankly, reset on that issue. And I just want to make the point there that it's a shared view by everyone in the league. It's not just coming from the league office. I think whether it's our teams, our Players Association, individual players, I think there's an acknowledgement across the league that we need to return to that principle, that this is an 82-game league. And that, of course, doesn't mean that we're turning the clock back, that players are expected to play through injuries, or that players, frankly, never need rest. But I think there's a statement of a principle that if you're a healthy player in this league, that the expectation is that you're going to play.
So Adam Silver further elaborated on the science and how they all of a sudden switched up. And he also elaborated on how they're going to try to maneuver on not interfering with teams' personal decisions, and also that these resting rules will be modified as they go along.
Honestly, that's what I had been told as well, that it was the science. And I think it may be why the league didn't become involved maybe as deeply as we should have earlier on. And part of the discussion today was about the science. And frankly, the science is inconclusive. I think and I've said this before, if the science were clear that players should be resting, we would be favoring it. And frankly, I'd be delivering the message to the fans even that you want these players to rest at certain times because that's going to keep them healthier and performing at a higher level and ensuring that they're on the floor at critical times in the season. What we talked about today is that the correlation, putting aside causation, isn't there even with players who participate in summer competitions like World Cups and Olympics. They are not more likely to get injured in that season. We don't see any statistical data suggesting that players increase their likelihood of getting injured as they go further along in the season, or even in back-to-backs, which may surprise people. And I think one of the things we're all learning with data and science is not to take anything for granted. See Sudafed, most latest disclosure, that something we all thought was clearly working, maybe isn't. That I think in the case here, that part of the commitment here from the league office is we are putting together a group of team doctors and scientists and others and trying to better understand it. One thing I want to make clear, that the message to our teams and players is not that rest is never appropriate. And I realize there's a bit of an art to this, not just the science, and that's with the hands-on trainers and coaches who are talking to players and saying, how do you feel? I'm certainly not saying that's not relevant. I think, at least in the first instance, in terms of this policy, we're trying to deal with some of the most egregious examples where multiple star players, for example, healthy, all out on the same night, healthy. And I think we're letting down the fans, we're letting down our partners.
Right there, he mentioned letting down our partners. That's the most important part right there. You know, they marketed this idea about safety during the little bubble that they had during the pandemic, but it was really about satisfying the TV partners. But it's interesting that Adam Silver also mentioned the Sudafed when they actually said Sudafed doesn't do what they thought it did after all these years. But it's funny he mentioned that. But he's making reference into the science. You know, at the end of the day, I've seen players talk about it. Players that kind of stuck in between two eras. Players like Paul George and Damian Lillard. You know, when they came into the league, they had the calluses almost that they had to build up you know, to make their body be used to playing all these games. And they're saying now with all this, you know, game today, rest tomorrow, game today, rest tomorrow, their bodies have a hard time of building up calluses.
At the same time, we're stating a principle in terms of an 82-game league and saying, let's all work together. And I think that was, I thought, the best news coming out of this policy, whether it was with the Players Association, individual players, or with our teams over the last 2 days. Everyone is acknowledging this is an issue, and it's an issue for the fans. So there was, the adoption of the policy was unanimous. There was full support from the Players Association. I think, though, people are also saying, well, let's see what this means in practice. What does it mean when a league doctor is coming in and separately looking at a player's health? I do think this policy will deal with the most egregious examples, and we'll go from there. And I just think, lastly, that, you know, even though the teams are highly competitive with each other, they shouldn't be competing when it comes to health and the science of performance and care for our players, especially since contracts have gotten shorter, players move from team to team. And I think we're declaring also there's more to be learned here. And I think rather, you know, in all seriousness, like the Sudafed example, saying let's really not just take for granted somebody saying load management. Well, of course you need to rest after this many days. Let's really study it and understand it and see if there are changes we need to make. And it may turn out, you know, a lot of the older players, by that I mean now at this point retired players, when I first became in the league, used to believe that they were more likely to get injured if they took nights off, that they would get out of rhythm. And
they were right about that. As you can see, when Adam Silver in 2016 started tweaking that schedule, stretching out the finals longer, just, you know, putting the schedule basically game rest, game rest, game rest. Guys used to at least play 3 games and then have 2 days rest. There was some sort of calluses that used to get built up, and guys' bodies were able to handle the playoffs and the intensity. Nowadays, guys don't have any buildup. Same way when you lift weights and you have the calluses in your hands, you sort of, you know, you can get used to lifting longer. The players, their bodies work the same way with this gruesome schedule. But once again, most of this is just to appeal to their TV partners. The NBA, along with, you know, cable networks and just traditional linear TV, they have a lot of competition. We're talking about streaming, social media, gaming, TikTok. Even with the younger demographics, most sports leagues are struggling to gain their attention. That's why the NFL has that program that they do with children, where they kind of have these broadcast shows for children, and they're sort of pivoting and trying to put themselves in front of the eyeballs of children, which is very difficult. Once again, that's why Ja Morant is a very big deal for the NBA, because just his charisma and the way he plays, how exciting he is, it attracts a very younger demographic to the league. It gets their eyeballs. Without children being interested in the league's future, or any sports league's future, would be kind of shaky. And the NFL, especially with the CTE and a lot of the medical conditions that come with playing in the NFL, they have to make sure that the league gets in front of the eyes of mothers and children to ensure the future of the league. And with the NBA, it's sort of the same thing. So they got to come up with a nice little package for their television partners to keep the league very interesting. I think Adam Silver, he's done a good job of that with the play-in and the mid-season tournament. But this resting policy was crafted very well, very slick. Because first of all, this resting policy is a team policy, which the CBA and the Players Association, they're not going to really have any say in this. So if things get violated with this policy, the teams get fined. So the owners really voted this in, aka guys like Steve Ballmer. You know, his players, Kawhi Leonard and Paul George, are some of the biggest violators of this policy. And low key, these guys pretty much know that their owner voted for this. So all the owners, they voted for this, including Steve Ballmer, man. Best believe they want this. And they want their TV partners to be successful, because that means they're successful. But yeah, the landscape is definitely changing as we see the regional sports networks filing for bankruptcy. The NBA kind of have to pivot a few markets, particularly in the Midwest or in the Sun Belt, like the Phoenix Suns. They got to kind of bunch up a lot of their TV deals into like a package bundle It's a lot of moving parts are going on, and everything pretty much starts with the cable companies, and the leverage that ESPN once had on them is pretty much dwindling away. So without them actually strongholding the cable companies, forcing them to pay the broadcast networks all this money, in which they then funnel onto the NFL, the NBA to get the TV rights. You see how this all has a trickle-down effect. So the American customer, basically the customer in general, has voted with their pockets. People are not signing up for cable subscriptions like that. Thus, it's kind of breaking the ESPN business model. So then it's going to have a trickle-down effect on the NBA's pockets, because to assume that these tech companies are just going to throw a lot of money into the NBA, it's a bad assumption. I mean, we could look at Apple. They have all the money in the world, but we've never seen them actually collaborate with a league like that. I mean, Amazon has a lot of money, but they kind of sign up for the NFL for just one day a week, where they could utilize, their whole services of Amazon Prime and whatever other services they have to put in front of the eyeballs of people. But this landscape is definitely interesting. We'll see how things play out, especially with the NBA negotiating with their TV partners probably for the last 2 or 3 years. But we're going to see the unveiling of this deal by next season.
With a more serious focus, roughly in the last year, it became part of collective bargaining. I should say the player participation policy is part of many steps we've taken, whether it's in the bargaining agreement itself, the 65 game limit for eligibility for awards, creating different incentives for players, like the play-in tournament, for example, like the in-season tournament to focus attention on the regular season. But the policy itself, I think it was the Players Association was very much part of it. We had extensive discussions with them, and then with individual groups of players, particularly veterans in the league, about how they thought we should be approaching it. And the last part of your question, yes, I do worry about infringing on how a team operates. And while we want to state a strong principle, I would say, at least initially, we're taking a somewhat light touch here. I think under the notion that change will probably happen here incrementally. I think we'll state this principle, see how teams react, and see if more needs to be done. But I think most importantly, there's a sense from all the different constituent groups in the league that this is ultimately about the fans, and that we've taken this too far. I mean, this is an acknowledgement that it's gotten away from us a bit, and that particularly I think when you see young, healthy players who are resting, and it becomes maybe even more notion of stature around the league as opposed to absolute needed rest, or it's just part of being an NBA player that you rest on certain days. And that's what we're trying to move away from.
Yeah, the marketing behind that is ugly. I agree. It's the marketing really behind that is ugly. It's not about the fans. It's just the marketing of the product. The product is we're going to rest. We're going to charge a lot of money, make a lot of money, and we're going to rest when we need to rest. That's horrible marketing. And I'm telling you, about most of the NBA, I would say 60% of the league is marketing. 60% is marketing. I would say 30% is business and 10% is basketball. And the marketing of the league, especially with guys resting, it sucks. It's not really about the fans. It's just a bad product to give out to fans and to your business partners. So definitely good call by Adam Silver here. But I found it interesting. He said that they spoke to the Players Association about it. The owners didn't have to get any permission from the Players Association. This is a team rule. They actually curved that whole situation with even just getting any type of approvals with the Players Association. I guess that's just a political move that, hey, we kind of gave them the heads up. But it's definitely not in the CBA because there's no player punishment. It's just team punishment. So all the owners definitely found a way to finesse their way and make their TV partners happy at the same time. The same way the owners, in a way, with the new CBA, they kind of slowly took away player movement. They slowly took it away. The players could only finesse billionaire owners for quite some time, man, because it's not going to work in the long run, because these guys have lawyers on their payroll that have years and years of just understanding contract language and having their ways to get around things. But for sure, the NBA TV partners are definitely scrambling. ESPN has been very careful of the way they kind of do their contracts now. They didn't sign the Big Ten contract, no MLS, even NASCAR. They said no to. So they're watching the way they're spending their money. And Disney, in a way, that issue with Charter is not good because they're trying to be part of cable bundles until they figure out how to monetize direct to consumer properly. So we'll see how a lot of this plays out.